Smart enough to win. That's how the story starts. Learning is the edge that sets your work apart. When the stakes get high and the pressure never stops, smart learning in your pocket puts your business at the top.
Welcome to the Learning Advantage, from Insight to Impact, where we're going to show how smart learning fuels real business results. I'm Deb Laurel, and I'm your host. So I welcome you today to our session. For over 40 years, Laurel and Associates Limited has worked alongside national and international managers to help them successfully manage employees and create and maintain a positive, supportive, and healthy work environment where they want to stay and do their best. We focus on making lackluster leaders legendary. The purpose of the Learning Advantage, from Insight to Impact, is to discuss how smart learning fuels real business results. In each episode, we strive to deliver actionable strategies, evidence-based design tips, and real-world case studies that show how learning strengthens organizational health, advances sustainability, and drives profitability. And for that reason, I'm delighted to introduce our guest for today, Kevin Suboski. So welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Deb. Thank you.
Kevin is an EOS implementer who helps entrepreneurs escape the zombie operating system and build businesses that actually work. He has been in business for over 30 years. Currently, he is increasing the effectiveness of other entrepreneurs through his Growing a Brilliant Business courses and helping leadership teams implement the entrepreneurial operating system, which is what EOS stands for. Kevin has worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs and is driven to help them live their best lives, helping them get more out of what they want out of their businesses and giving them the confidence and peace of mind that comes from doing right work well. So, Kevin, welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you, Deb. Good to be here.
And we're going to get right into the questions.
Good. I love it.
When you think about learning as a competitive advantage, what does that mean in the context of your organization or your work?
In mine or just anybody's? In my org?
However you'd like to answer that.
Yeah, so I work with entrepreneurs, and so a lot of people call themselves business coaches, and I'd say I'm a coach for entrepreneurs. And it's a lot of people conflate the two. They think of entrepreneurship equals business, and I just don't think that way. I think that they're very different domains of action, and so I think everybody does themselves a disservice by not separating them. And so entrepreneurship is really, it's about the front end part of business where you're inventing an offer. You know, it really starts with having a pulse of the world and people's, what people are up to, and helping them come up with better ways to solve their problems, communicating it well, and then helping them implement it. And all that's like the front end creative part of a business. And once you have that figured out, then the business practices help make it efficient and scale it. But most of the things that people teach in business aren't really helpful. The assumption is that the entrepreneur sort of magically comes up with something valuable that people want. And so there's not a lot that's taught about that. And so what I see network, and they taught us entrepreneurship, innovation, and leadership. And the fundamental concept behind what they taught was that our common sense about business is about things. It's about taking inputs, modifying inputs, and creating outputs. And what they said is, if you think about business as a network of commitments among human beings, it changes everything. And if you're going to be a professional in some domain, you study the fundamentals of the material you work with. And so as a leader, as an entrepreneur, you're working with people. And so we studied biology, especially neurology, philosophy, and linguistics. And so really, how do these organisms function? Because if you really, those things are all about influencing human behavior. And so the more that you understand the nature, of human nature and human beings, the more effective you can be. And so we studied learning at a very fundamental level. We studied a neurology textbook called The Tree of Knowledge, and really studied how this works and how we know what we know. I know I'm almost to the punchline here, Deb, so forgive me for such a long-winded answer to your question, but it's what I learned is that really changes things a lot is that we know the world through language. We have distinctions for the world, and those distinctions are organized into discourses. And so, for instance, there's a discourse of business that was sort of defined at, in the Industrial Revolution. And so a lot of what we know about business was invented 150 years ago. And it was cross appropriated from the military. And so everything that we know was invented and worked sometime in the past, generally 50 years or more. If we know something because of the community we're in, it's kind of old. Everything that we know is based upon our interpretations from the past. And so if you're not learning and if you're not looking for the leading edge, then you are 50 years behind in the sort of technology of our understanding of the world. And so anybody that's a professional that isn't also a professional learner is already behind anybody that is constantly seeking out new interpretations, because our awareness, our conceptions of reality evolve over time as a community, and the evolution of what we know is on the fringes, and it isn't, the best people in any field know something that the majority of the people don't know. So that was a long-winded answer, but how did I do? What do you think of that? Did I answer your question?
It sounds like learning is a competitive advantage and that we have to keep learning or we're going to be stuck in ideas left over from 50 to 150 years ago. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it is. And so much of it depends upon what you want out of life. You know what I mean? If you want average, then just use what is available in sort of in the normal course of things. If you want something better than average, if you want a better outcome than average, then you have to seek more powerful interpretations. And so, yes, it gives you a competitive advantage if that's what you're seeking. Not everybody is.
Okay, that's true. We're we're not necessarily pushing competitive advantage so much as learning being a critical piece in business and in making having a real impact on results.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you share a specific example where a learning initiative moved from insight to real impact and how you measured that impact?
So just some, very recent examples. So in my work, I work with entrepreneurs. And so people who are really have not completely refined their offers so that it's resonant in the industry and people are buying enough to make you satisfied, right? So the front end of business is entrepreneurship. And so I work with those people, and generally they live in sort of a business discourse and are trying to succeed. In other words, they have entrepreneurship problems and they're trying to solve them with business solutions, and then everybody's frustrated when it doesn't work and it shouldn't work. And so I teach them a different interpretation of what makes the difference for an entrepreneur. And so one of my current clients that I really love the work that she's doing, when I first met her, she told me she was a dressmaker. And I told her, I don't think so. I think you do something different. And so, because what I'm focused on is, entrepreneurs, to succeed, you need to make a difference in people's lives in a way that is relevant for them. And as much as we all need clothing, I think that what she does is something different, the impact of the clothing. And so she started to tell me about it. And she said, when most clothing is built around some average, and so most women wear clothing that doesn't fit their body and they don't feel good about themselves. And so when she works with somebody, she builds clothing that fits who they are, and it makes them feel beautiful, which is very important. And that makes them feel confident. And because they're confident, they can move through the world with more power and make and do better things, make a bigger difference. And so to me, that's what she does. And so, and when, and so that's a result of a lot of the education. It's like, so what matters to that person? Is it that they need a dress? Not what she does. What matters to them is that they feel confident and good about themselves and are able to do more in the world. And so in the first year after she hired me to help her with that, and we went through a lot of iterations, she doubled her income. And into the second year, in April of that year, she made half as much money in a month as she did the previous year or 2 years ago, before she started with me. And that's really important, obviously. But the thing that I kind of love about my job is to watch her, because she's designing the business, she's evolving the business in a direction that fits who she is better and addresses fundamental human concerns. And so she walks around lit. When you meet her, she's just got a light about her. And when she talks about her business, she is smiling. When she talks to people and she shares this different way of thinking about her business, everyone smiles at her when she does it. And she's making a difference. And so as much as she's making a lot more money, she's also, every person that comes in, she's made their lives better, and that matters to her. And so she's living a better life and making a lot more money because she learned a different way to think about being an entrepreneur.
Oh, that's
How's that?
wonderful. I love
Yeah.
it.
And
Absolutely love it.
I have a lot of experiences like that. One of the things I tell people is my goal is to transform the lives of solopreneurs, to have an experience, to be able to touch people in a way that they would say is transformative. And so at the end of my courses, I ask people, was this a transformative experience? And about 75% say it was. And I tell them, don't lie to me. Don't be sweet, because I'll know, because you can tell. You can tell when people have had a transformative experience. And that's about the case, and then, and the way that they hold themselves, the way that they speak, all of that gives them a better life. And guess what? They make a lot more money in their business as well.
Well, that's a marvelous example.
Thank you.
What do you see as the biggest barrier preventing organizations from fully embracing lifelong learning, and how do you think we can overcome it?
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. I think the biggest barrier to learning, I'm a big fan of open and honest communication and being open. And to me, open is being able to set aside your preconceived notions about some topic and listen to something that's different than what you believe in. And so, at least be open to hearing it. And then you can disagree later. But the opposite, I think, to open is certain. And the reality is the way that we're wired, the way that we're biologically built, by default produces certainty. We don't like uncertainty. Our bodies, if we are in an environment that we don't understand, it's frightening at a physical level. I think of this example that I have is you take most people have had this experience where you take a cat from your house to somebody else's to a new place. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you put a cat into a new house, they just freak out and they just run to find a spot to hide. That's the biological sort of reaction to being in an environment that you don't understand. Because if you don't understand it, you don't know where the dangers lie. You don't know how to, so we're biologically wired to feel comfortable when we know our environment. And so what we know is what we have language for. And so if somebody comes and tells you that what you know isn't serving you, it's naturally frightening. And so we resist. That's the natural state of human beings. And it's only through a process, an intellectual process, do we get to the point where it's like, ooh, my life can be improved if I go through the discomfort of being in a place where I question my my interpretations of the world. And so I think it's about 90% of the population are what I call Cartesian. And Cartesian is the interpretation that the world is fixed, objective, knowable, and out there. The 10% live in a linguistic reality where we know that reality is really our interpretation. If there is such thing as an objective reality, we don't have the tools to know it. And so those people who have a linguistic orientation are more open, right? So whatever I know, and this is so how I've gotten over the years is like when I hear somebody disagree with me, I'm saying something, they say, I don't think that's true. It's like, I get excited because it's like, ooh, something, unless it's something a lot of times I've gone down that path 20 times and explored it and like found that way of thinking and being and said, yeah, I've moved past that. But when somebody says something I hadn't heard of yet, it's like, oh, wow, that's exciting, which is uncommon. And so you've got this reality in business that there are all sorts of fundamental resistance to learning new things. I think that's the biggest barrier. And I think it has to come from the top in terms of a measure of openness and curiosity, being in a mood of wonder rather than in a mood of certainty. And so I used to work in really big companies, and the more that I studied human behavior, the more that I implemented in my business, the more I could see the power of the human-centered way of thinking about business in this open, curious way of being. It had a profound effect on my business and was very successful, largely because of the stuff that I learned in Aginet. And but my clients, big companies, aren't like that. As much as the big companies say that employees are our biggest asset, most people I talk to say that that's not the experience that they have. And so and I stuck with it for a long time to try to be an agent of change and to bring things. And the truth is there are a lot of managers in most corporations that are like that, are curious, that are in a state of wonder and want to evolve and learn new things. But the systems in which they exist resist that. And so if it doesn't come from the top, my conclusion is that if the CEO wasn't driving it, I was not going to be able to have an effect. And that's why I work with small businesses, because I can work with the CEO. and I can share with them a new interpretation, and they can run with it, and they can make a change. They can be the change they want to see, and it starts with this with a mood of wonder, of curiosity.
And I guess also when you have the CEO leading that, then there is a sense of psychological safety that it's okay to disagree, it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to try something new.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was just talking with somebody like a few days ago, and they were talking about their organization, and their manager's manager asked a group full of people about what was going on. They was doing something, and how's that working? And the guy that I was talking to said, it's terrible, but I'm not going to say anything, because it's a culture where if you step out of the bounds of like how it's supposed to be, you get your knuckles wrapped in some way, sort of psychological. So yeah, people learn, you know what I mean? They know if it's not safe to question things, then it's really tough to have a learning organization. So yeah, if the boss isn't doing it, there's definitely a wise psychological response, and a lot of times it's just an intellectual one, where it's like it's obvious that it is not safe to question anything. And if it's not safe to question anything, I don't know, learning is not very potent.
It's not going to happen. Yeah, it's really not
It's
going to
not going to
happen.
happen.
In your view, what's
Yeah,
one?
one of the things when we
Oh, go ahead.
so one of the things that I studied in the coursework was levels of innovation. All right, so innovation is, coming up with new standard practices. A lot of times we think innovation is in the product, and that's one way to think about it. But a more powerful way to think about it is that product enables any new product that has an innovation in it, enables some new practice. And so you can have a minor innovation or you can have a major innovation. There's stages of them. But if you a major innovation has a radical shift in practices, right? So we know all the ones like the car, computers, AI, all of these, so the radical innovations make significant changes. And so if you've got an environment like that where it's not acceptable to question things, the most that you can have is very slow, minor innovations. And so over time, your competitors, where they have a more open environment where people can innovate faster because they can question the standard practice, they're just going to eat you up at some point in the future. The market will, make that out. Anyways, what was your next question, Deb?
Well, I'm glad you said that.
Okay, good.
In your view, what's one outdated belief about corporate learning that we need to let go of, and what should replace it?
What's one outdated view of corporate learning? Well, so at the beginning, you introduced me with my phrase that I generally I talk about the zombie operating system, and where that came from is, I said that my IT company, my customers were Fortune 5,000, bigger businesses, and um, and what I was learning about how to run my business at the time was profound and very different than what I'd learned in the big corporations. Um, and so I tried to bring that to those big companies, and it's really hard to make shifts when they're closed down. And what I would say is is most of what we know from business about how to run business, what I call the background of obviousness. Background of obviousness is those things that we know about the world without reflection. They just are obviously true. Everybody knows it. And it forms like our automatic behaviors, right? So the things that we do without reflection. And again, that our background of obviousness is the product of long ago new ideas, right? For it to become the background of obviousness, it sort of has to be just in your DNA, in your muscle, and everybody's muscle. And so from a business perspective, a lot of what's in our background of obviousness was invented in the Industrial Revolution. And it was cross appropriated from the military because at the time, there really most people were not organizing the activities of dozens of people. And if you build a factory, you need a lot of people. And how do you organize that behavior? There weren't models, and so they had to create them. And so the military did have models for how to organize people, and so they took that, and that persists. And so there's two features of that that are have useful application. I don't want to completely dismiss them, but the utility is far less than it's sort of the pervasive way of thinking. And that is, first of all, it's thing based. And when you think about so it was manufacturing. And so a lot of how we organized was managing things. And then we took that and applied it to human beings. We simplified human beings into automatons. And so human resources, so much of the things that we do in business treats people like objects, because it's a thing-based background of obviousness, and it's kind of cheaper. Human beings are complicated and difficult. And so, how do ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk deal with thousands of people? It's like, well, if you've got to have an individual sort of response about, how do you treat somebody? Well, it depends on them. What's their experience? That's harder. And this is why for entrepreneurs, they don't have a choice. They have to treat people as individuals, but that's a different topic. So there's two things. So thing-based and coercive. So the military model is coercive. Do these things or we will kill you, right? Go into battle or I will chop your head off. That is, and that coercive model persists in leadership in big companies. And so those two things that were thing-based and coercive creates an environment that consumes human energy. It's extractive. The big business, the zombie operating system way of running a business extracts human energy for the sake of profit production without regard of the impact to human beings. And the way I came up with this name is, during the pandemic, it was really tough, and especially in food service. And so I was driving through a Wendy's one day, and this guy at the window, just was a zombie. It just, you could tell the life had just been sucked out of him. And when I thought back to my life at corporate life, I mean, that is just the experience that I have with working with people and talking to people about their job in big corporations, where it has sucked the life out of them, how they're treated and how they have to treat other people. And so I think those are two fundamental notions that drive the process for how do we do business that is extremely destructive, and is nowhere near as potent as a human-centered orientation. I do meet organizations, about 1 in 20, maybe 1 in 30 now, it's less, that they truly do treat people with dignity. And a lot of people hear what I say as though I'm a preacher about being nice to everybody. And so I've got 2 clients that, for about 9 months, I was telling them, you've got to fire that person. you know, it's like, and so when you look at what they're trying to do from an organization perspective, those guys aren't a fit. So it's not about, keeping them on for some reason. No, you have to fire them. It isn't good for you. It isn't good for them. And now do it with dignity, because everybody's watching how you do this. Everybody's watching how you treat that person when they no longer fit what you're trying to accomplish. And so just because they don't fit what you're trying to accomplish doesn't mean you should treat them with a lack of dignity. And so, not because I'm a preacher and I think it's, that's all. The nice thing is it's all good things, but it's like, if you treat that person without a sense of dignity, then this is part of what shuts people down to change, right? So if you're going to tell somebody what they're doing is wrong, and then they say, and then you end up getting fired over the deal. A lot of times, if we're not a fit at the organization, we don't mind. Well, I mean, it's traumatic, but we understand, and it's got to be done. But if you do it in a dignified way, everybody else can go like, okay, I can stand up, but they're going to treat me in a dignified way. The other thing I work on is I talk to people about mobilizing through ambition. Our model motivates people. We give people energy to move. Mobilize is energy that comes from within, because the reason I'm doing these things serves me. And so if, as a leader, you are focused on that person's ambition and you work diligently to produce that outcome for them, for their benefit, they will love you and they will take great care of you. To do that, you need the right people in the right seats. Because if that person's ambition is going to take you where you want to go, then you can do that. You can be really on their side, because if you help them win, you're going to win. And that's a good business design. That's smart business design. But the minute their ambition is orthogonal to yours, isn't taking them in the right direction, then you have to end the relationship, because you're both hurting each other. And so, these notions of a thing-based, coercive, make it so people are giving the minimal amount. People talk about quiet quitting, and I really despise that term in a way, because what it's saying is nobody's going above and beyond the call of duty, right? Everybody's like doing the script. Well, the truth is, big corporations have been doing that for 30 years, where they're not giving you anything extra. And so, but they're expecting you to do extra. And so it was an unbalanced. And so people just finally figured it out. Just finally got the memo. And it's like, wait a second, why should I go above and beyond the call of duty then when these guys won't do anything for me? And so that's what happens if you don't take care, if you don't understand people's concerns, if you're not committed to them, if you don't take it, mobilize, help them, help their ambition, then they can be 100%, 150% on board. They'll think about work afterwards. They'll work longer, harder, be in a better mood. All of that happens if you include their humanity into the business. So, how's that?
That's good. That's good. How are you leveraging data, technology, or new learning methods to create more personalized and effective learning experiences?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a cliche answer at the time right now, but it's the truth, which is AI. The and so, I have the same reactions everybody else does, which is like, and I don't know that you've had this reaction, but I find that most people have that reaction that I talked about earlier, which is something new is frightening. you know, and I know a lot of people that still won't use AI, and I really didn't want to. It's scary to me. It is. But the truth is, all innovations are frightening because it's changing the landscape. It's changing what we know about the world. And so we're like that cat that's getting dropped into a new house. We don't know how this works. We don't know where the danger is. And so everything's dangerous. Um, but but what appears to be true, at least in the past, is that, you know, all these technologies are disruptive. There are people whose lives get diminished. You know, farming, we used to be 90% of the population farmers, and then we got all the equipment, and now it's a very small percentage of our population. So there were a lot of people whose livelihood shifted and their lives were upended. But for a lot of other people, it was incredibly potent. And so, and I found that with AI, and it's been the source of incredible progress in my business, and therefore the value that I bring to my clients. Um, so being able to have a thinking partner with the stuff that I do, which almost nobody knows about. Nobody knows reciprocal coonogenic structural coupling or autopoiesis. You know, they don't know Maturana. They don't know Fernando Flores. They don't know, Cartesian thinking or linguistics. It's not the normal thing that people think of. So I don't have very many people that are knowledgeable for me to think with. And guess what? AI knows all those people a lot better than I do. And so uh, I told you at the beginning before we started that I'm doing a lot of writing, and it's just like we used to write on a pad of paper, and then we use a word processor, and guess what? We could get those words in the document quicker. Um, and I'm a mad scientist in a way. I'm creating this stuff, and I think a lot of people adore the process of writing. I don't. I do adore having written something because of the ability of it to communicate these complex thoughts, that I think make a profound difference in people's lives. And having, the world's best ghostwriter that can operate at 100 times the speed of any ghostwriter out there, where I go for walks and I transcribe. I just say, I'm going to write a paper. The last one, I was like, are you lit or are you lost? And I just go through and say, this is what I say about this is the content. And so instead of, it's like we used to write on paper and now we type. Well, now I just talk into this thing and I wrote the paper conceptually. And then, on my walk, I send it to, I'm using Claude now, and send it to Claude and say, hey, write me a paper on this. And then by the time I get back to my home, it's written. It's not right. Um, and I have to massage it, because it doesn't fully understand, and it doesn't understand the human experience really. It thinks it does, but it doesn't. And the things that I say them, and I see the reaction I get with people, and so I know what works that way. AI knows what works in a different way, and it's not quite there. And so I am learning how to use a new tool that has had a profound has helped me through what would have been a 5-year transition to do it in a year, I would say, in terms of the evolution. And I was telling you again before we came on that the kind of response I'm getting from the marketplace is profound. I've really found a vein that people resonate with when I talk to them about entrepreneurship is different than business. Now, business people don't get it, frankly. Entrepreneurs go like, yeah, no kidding. How I told this to one woman and she got mad. She was like, why has no one ever told me this before? Because it's such a useful frame of reference. Um, and so the degree to which, because I have this thinking partner, and a lot of times it's just, me talking to it or typing it. It's like I think that's like therapy. Any therapy, a lot of the value of therapy is you talking. Maybe 80% I think is, and then whatever they say back is useful. But so much of it is like you've got to organize your thoughts and say it to another person in a way that holds together in some way in your mind. And so and I'm giving you, I'm the long answer guest, if you didn't notice that, but I wanted to give you the context. So did that answer your question? I hope I understood your question.
Yes, it did. It definitely did. If you could give one piece of advice to leaders who want to build a true culture of continuous learning, what would it be?
So you're living in 100-year-old interpretation of leadership. I want them all to know that. And they're living in an interpretation that serves a set of purposes, right? It's an efficient orientation. And I want to share, like, to me, the fundamental behind what's like, if you can see this in how people think of leadership, I think it can transform you, because it'll open you up to new ways of thinking. And so I can't teach you I have a whole discourse on entrepreneurial leadership. And to be able to understand that, to get to it, a lot of people are talking about trying to refine leadership to make it more human-centered. Servant leadership has been around for 30 years or something like that. There's a lot of people working on it. But what I would say is almost everybody I talk to that teaches leadership, that is viewed as a good leader, they have a common frame of reference about what leadership is. And if you listen for it, you can hear it in everyone. And the background of obviousness, the frame of reference upon which all of our leadership understanding and distinctions rest, is that leadership is the set of practices to get someone else to do something that serves you. Leadership is moving people in my direction. That's what leadership is. And if you think about it, this is, military, although in a lot of ways the military has evolved because they know they have gotten more human-centered in a way. But ultimately, so leadership, when you think about that, that's exactly what they're doing. Now you can do that in big corporations because you have what I call positional power. You are in a position of power, and it's coercive, because if you don't do what I tell you to do, I will produce consequences for you that matter, right? So, and that's coercive. A commitment-based culture says, let's work this out. Let's figure out what's the right thing to do. And let's work that out. And does that work for you? You can negotiate. Anyway, I won't talk about because the alternative there is there. It's not easy or obvious, because you still have a job to do. You still have to get your thing done. But a really good leader lives in a space that is helping somebody get to a place that serves them. And you can see this in some leaders, and we all have someone like this in our past. My first boss out of college was one of those people. He actually, asked me questions about me. He wanted to know, and he saw what I wanted, and he facilitated me getting what I wanted. It really mattered to him. But it's a 1 in 20 kind of thing where people sort of rock the boat and go that way. So that's positional leadership. The reason I call it entrepreneurial leadership, and this is at the heart of what I teach people, entrepreneurs, is everybody's teaching you this business and corporate leadership because they have positional power. An entrepreneur does not have any positional power. All they have is social power, which you earn. by being a decent human being, by caring about someone else's concerns, to focus your business on solving someone else's concerns, taking care, if that's the center of what you're doing, is addressing other people's concerns in a way that serves them in the way they want it to work. If you're good at that, you'll make great offers that people will want. You don't have to sell. You just have to show it to them. And they go like, oh my God, where have you been all my life? Thank you. And so if people can just see that what they're being taught and what they're executing is a style of leadership that is across the board based on getting other people to do things that serve you. And if you can shift your mindset and say, my role as a leader is to help people get to a place that they want to be. And then you have to be clever. Yes, you have to be clever. You have to have the right people in the right seats. Because if they want to go in a direction that doesn't take you where you want to go, then you have to be extractive to them. You can't serve them. Otherwise, you will betray your own concerns. And so designing a business that's going in a direction and specifying it clearly so that you can hire people that share your core values, that want to accomplish what you accomplish. And if you succeed in your business, then they celebrate because, oh my God, I got what I wanted. If you can design your business that way, then you can authentically be this entrepreneurial leader type of a person. And so I think that to me is like being able to see that can open your mind to hear new ways to think about leadership that will have a profound effect on people's willingness to follow you in lockstep and with passion and enthusiasm and say, I'd love to do that. In fact, I'm going to do these extra things, which is what we want to do. Toby Hecht used to call it putting people in a wrist lock. He says, you want to know how to get people to follow you closely? You get them in a wrist lock. And the wrist lock, very peculiar language sometimes. The way to get them into a wrist lock is to figure out what they most want in life, improve it for them, design a future that's better for them than they even thought possible, and then help them get it. Be the source of helping contribute to them to help them produce a future that's better than they could have even imagined. You will get people dying to work for you. I used to, when I interviewed people, I would ask them their ambition, because I'd tell them, you're not going to retire from my company. This was IT, 30 years ago. And so that was all young people. You're not going to retire from my company. Our job is to figure out where would be awesome. What's your awesome next steps? And our job is to figure out what your gap is and help you get ready for that, so that when you're ready to graduate from here, you move on to some place that's amazing for you. And I tell people this, and most people go like, you told people they're going to leave you? That's crazy. And it's like, they don't get it, because I did this. I really did it. When I was in when I would meet with them, I would say, what do you want? And I'd say, have you ever thought about doing this? And they'd go like, do you think I could do that? I said, yes, I do. But there's gaps. We all have skills gaps. And so we're going to fill those gaps. And then I did it. I would remind them of their ambition, because people forget it. They forget what they're trying to get. I would remind them. And then I would do things along the way. I would say, hey, I'm going to send you on a sales call because you want to have a business someday and you need to learn how to sell. And we need somebody to go out with their salespeople. And so go on that and you're going to learn that. And so I did this stuff. I did it. Those people didn't leave me. They stayed twice as long as they would have otherwise. Why would you leave that? No matter how, your ambition, you're going to postpone that. So doing that kept them longer, made their time with me way more productive, made them passionate about what they did. Not only was I lit as the entrepreneur, everybody in my company was lit. It was a profound experience. And so if you can be that leader who's helping people get to where they want to be, that's why you do it. It's a freaking great life.
It's marvelous. Okay. What's one book, resource, or learning experience that has had a lasting impact on you personally?
Yeah, so there's two books, and I tell people about these books, and no one reads them. They're difficult. They're difficult. The Tree of Knowledge is a neurology book. It's a book about how we know what we know. That changed my life in a way. I remember when I was traveling when I finished it. I did the last chapter, and when I walked off the airplane, I walked into a different world. People were different to me, how they behaved, and um, it enabled me. So that and the other book, Disclosing New Worlds by Fernando Flores, um, and Computers and Cognition, but Fernando Flores, they they disclosed the mechanics of how why people do what they do to me that that was like seeing the Matrix. When I'm working with people, I see stuff other people can't see that helps me understand so the models that we see the world with, the best way to test as to whether they're good models is whether they predict the future. And so when I work with people, I say, you should do that, if you do this and this and this, good things are going to happen. And then they go do this, this, and this, and good things happen. Then that model that I used to help them see works. And so a model of human behavior, if you say, well, if somebody's in this situation and this is how they are, then this is what's going to happen. And the models that I have are very predictive. And so it allows me to anticipate. So I get to know people. I see narratives in people's heads because that's how we see the world. And so one of the concepts they had was listening for people's listening, paying attention to how people hear, what's inside their brain, and it gives you the capacity to know what their reality is. And if you know what someone else's reality is, you can understand and predict how they're going to respond to certain situations. And so those had a profound effect on my life, and they're difficult because it's not standard, it's deep.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Um, so I talk to people about being human centered, because that's essential for you to be a great entrepreneur. And when I say human centered, a lot of people think it's like heart centered or nice, and it really isn't. It's like understanding the mechanics. What's the user interface? What's the user's manual for these organisms, other human beings? Um, and so being human centered, and I started this 20 years ago, and I will tell you that the competitive advantage that gives me is profound. That when I meet somebody and they feel, one of the terms I use all the time is cherish. So cherish is holding another person's concerns as though they were your own. Something that Toby taught us right at the beginning. And how do you sell? How do you sell, right? We don't like selling. The best way to sell is to cherish them, understand their concerns, and hold those concerns and take care of them. Um, and so the reaction that I get to people, they know this isn't a trick that I'm doing. This is not a technique. It's just who I am. And at first it probably was a technique, but it really is who I am now. I do care and I do want to help. And if I can't help, I'll tell people, this isn't the place for you. And the reason this is a thing that I want to bring up is that when I think about when I started learning these 25 years ago, what the world was like and what it's like now, I think we continuously wring the humanity out of the world. I think we're continuing to treat each other like machines, and we're all suffering from it. I feel like we're all heartsick over how people are treating each other, how people treat you, and sometimes how you treat other people. It's like it's a difficult time, and it's going to get worse, which means the competitive advantage of being human centered and cherishing is going to continue to be more profound. If you shift your business, and I do this with my clients, and watch, pay attention to those businesses that are really good at understanding their customers' concerns and are dedicate themselves to take care of concerns in a way that the customers want them taken care of. You'll crush it. You'll crush it, because when I treat people this way, and when I get people treat me this way, it feels so good. It's like finally someone sees me, and they're listening to me, and they care, and they're like doing things that demonstrate that they care. That's weird, but God, it feels good, And to me, that's a huge, and it's going to be continuing for at least the next 10 years. With AI coming, we're all going to feel this so much more. We're feeling the humanity evaporating for how we're being treated and how we treat each other. So pay attention to being human-centered and bring the humanity back. And so I documented, I write a lot. And so I have a newsletter that I send out mostly weekly that is really content that most people have never seen before. And so if any of your listeners want to get on my mailing list, send me an email. I'll give you my easy email. It's kevin@suboski.com. So it's on the screen there, Kevin Suboski. Kevin@suboski.com. Send me an email. Happy to get you on there. And if any of you want to hear about the courses that I run, they're all peer-based courses where everybody's learning together and helping each other design business, design marketing, implement more effective entrepreneurial leadership. These are profound, life-changing courses. This is my customers' reports. It's why I do it, why I continue to do it, because I put people through it, and they're like, this was amazing. It's like, shit, I guess I have to keep doing these. There's probably other ways to make more money, frankly, but it has a profound effect. So if you want to know more about those, Kevin@suboski.com. My website, fastestrroute.co. And
Fastest
so, yeah,
route.
love to hear from you. .co, not com. .co, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. This has been marvelous. And I didn't know how much of a philosopher and a humanist that you are. So this has been eye-opening for me. And I want to thank our listeners for listening in and participating in our conversation. I hope that you learned as much from this session as I did. Please join us next week on July 14th as we meet with Josh Mayleaf, who creates high-impact learning experiences that translate behavioral theory into operational results. And if you truly want good leaders and you need good trainers, please contact me. I have an assessment that will help you identify their strengths and their challenges so that you can be sure you have good leaders, good managers, and good trainers. And please remember that Laurel and Associates is always focused on making lackluster leaders legendary as smart learning fuels real business results. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Learning Advantage from Insight to Impact. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Every lesson, every workshop, every failed attempt you save becomes a map upon the desktop, shows the road you've craved. Da, 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 da.